All right, well, we are going to dive deep today. I'm glad you're here. I hope you're glad. But this one's going to be experiential, but also just a lot of study that I've done in the last, few years. That I just was like, I feel like sometimes things get lost along the way. And I feel like in this season that we're in, I was finishing things up with this the other night, and I just felt almost this urgency, like what I was writing, it felt like at the end felt like a plea. And I was trying to listen to the Lord in that too, to know that He needs the people who are willing to listen in this hour, in this time. And so I'm really excited that you all wanted to come and hear about it, because that already tells me your heart. And so as we get started, I just want to pray and say, Lord, thank you so much for this time. I ask that you would help us to hear from you and only you during this time. Help us even now to tune our ears to heaven, to be listening to what you have to say to us collectively, but also individually. We give this time to you. We ask that you would bless it. We ask that you would speak to us. Amen.
Amen.
So, the purpose in this is to pause today and to take a deep breath. Isn't it funny when someone says that? You do?
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's very helpful.
You do. Yeah, you're like, you kind of remember that breathing's important, right? You're like, oh yeah, and I should probably just relax a little
The
bit.
book
but
says breath, just saying.
It does. Yes,
Absolutely.
one of the things I've been reading about as well. And so today we want to slow down, but we also want to discover and remember something that's lost. And so a few months ago, I believe I was reading Walk on the Water or Walking on the Water, Madeline L'Engle. That wrote
Walking on water.
Walking on. It's so good. If you haven't read it, you guys. There was so much. Like, the woman is a genius. So I was like, wow, I hope I know all of these things when I'm her age. But what she told, and it was just like in the middle of something she was speaking about. It didn't exactly, like, her book wasn't about listening. But it really sparked a curiosity for this teaching for me, as well as just made me think, it challenged me in a way that was like, wow, like the seriousness of listening. And so these are the words of a Hawaiian elder named Alice. She said, "Before the missionaries came, my people used to sit outside their temples for a long time, meditating and preparing themselves before entering. They would then virtually creep to the altar to offer their petition, and afterwards they would again sit a long time outside, this time to breathe life into their prayers. The Christians, when they came, just got up, uttered a few sentences, said amen, and were done. For that reason, my people call them heoles, which means without breath, for those who failed to breathe life into their prayers. To this day, non-native Christians are still called heoles in Hawaii." It forced me to ask myself some questions. Why am I so hurried? Why am I so rushed and so nonchalant with my time with the Lord? When did this become okay? Because it's not. This shallow form of communication I'd had with the Lord resulted in a shallow relationship with Him, with the Father. Insecurity flourishes and confusion abounds when the maker of all and the giver of peace sits day after day on his throne of grace, extending his hand towards us, inviting us closer, drawing us to his side. Will we go? Will we sit at his feet again? He has so much he wants to share with us. Things, like I said, we need to know in this season and for the future and for the days ahead. The thing is, he's never stopped speaking, but we have stopped listening. So our question today is, how is your listening life? Are you making time for stillness? Time where you can hear from the Lord. If we're never still, we can't. and time not just listening in a communication form, but time just in his presence. And we'll talk more about the distinguishing between those two later. So my listening journey, I was always a discerning child and always a sensitive child. And probably most of you have always been maybe on the sensitive side too. A lot of times us artists are. We are able to use those sensitivities to hear from the Lord, to feel what he feels. Sometimes that means feeling what other people feel too, right? But so I wasn't void of hearing from the Lord or feeling from the Lord, but I had never been disciplined or skilled and done any training to that skill. And so really when Chrissy introduced me to two-way journaling, it focused my mind in a way I hadn't been able to focus it before. So I'm a little ADD, a little all over the place in my mind. A lot of things get my attention. And so when I did this and started writing, and the two-way journaling was like a prayer form of writing. I'm writing, asking the Lord a question, listening for his answer, and writing it. I could focus that moment and stay right there in his presence that I couldn't when just praying in my head, because my head was swimming all the time. And it just kind of unlocked something for me in a way that I still, so these books here, some of those are books I'm reading, and the two bottom ones are my recent listening journals. The red one, I'll grab it here really quick just to, all these earmarks. This is my 2018 listening journal, and all these earmarks are, when you have this and you look back, these were all the ways the Lord was guiding my family here. All the ways. This was my time to look back and say, Lord, is it time? Was it a move for us when we moved from Ohio, just in November? But I'll explain more about how I've used this skill later. But it has been life-changing for real for me. My family's here, and it's really honestly because of focusing my mind to be able to listen. So I've been practicing ever since in that focused way when Chrissy introduced me to that years ago. And I've taught on listening, how to distinguish the voice of God, so is that the Lord or not. But I just started getting curious lately, when I read that about the Hawaiian, what they call Christians, I thought, oh my goodness, what has been lost here? And what can we learn from it? And how it's a lost art. And by art, I mean it's a skill doing a specified thing. Typically one acquired through patience and practice. So I searched and I read a lot of books, a lot of articles, and I want to give us a little bit of maybe a historical context so that we can see where it's been throughout the centuries, different people and how they've used it. And we're going to literally go all the way back to Adam, but the point today is really a simple one. Listening to Jesus is imperative to your life. And that's the main point. If I don't get through all of this today, that's what I want you to take away. It's imperative. And in this season, it truly is. We need to be listening. So if we start all the way back to the beginning, take me back to the garden. Anyone know that reference? Anyway. I love that song. We see that the Lord walked in the garden with Adam. And I thought, wow, just this time spent, could you imagine walking with God in a garden? Mm-hmm. The time spent not only just beside each other, but outside in creation, which we're going to talk more about too. This relationship that he was establishing and setting a precedent for from the very beginning was that he wanted a very intimate, intentional relationship with you. One that he would walk with you in a garden. Mm-hmm. He was not far away at all. He was right there. And then even moving forward into the Psalms, and Chrissy teaches us a lot about the Psalms. David has many passages really that you can read that are two-way journalings. I mean, he's talking to the Lord, and he's writing the Lord's response. there's also this intimacy that he has where he's always bearing his heart before the Lord. But the Lord is then bearing his heart back to him. You know, it's like there's a very intimate relationship where they're sharing in that way. And it's a beautiful thing. And he spoke over and over about meditating on the Word of God, meditating day and night. And then I wanted to jump forward to Jesus himself, because I know that we talk about Jesus went away to go pray, right? He stepped away. But I wanted to look at all of those times, and there were, I want to talk about 6 different times that he chose to go away by himself so that he could have this moment of listening, this moment of stillness. He did it in order to prepare for a major task. So in Luke 4, 1 through 2 and 14 through 15, after he was baptized, he spent these 40 days in the wilderness praying. So he was preparing for this ministry. Secondly, to recharge after hard work. In Mark 6:30 through 32, Jesus sent the 12 disciples out to do ministry, and when they returned, he encouraged them to separate from the people who were following them to rest. So he even taught his disciples the importance of, like, hey, you've been ministering, you've been with the people, it's time to go away and rest.
Where was that?
That one was Mark 6:30 through 32. Thirdly, to work through grief.
Mm-hmm.
After he learned that his cousin John the Baptist had been beheaded, he went away by himself. This was in Matthew 14, 1 through 13. Fourthly, before making an important decision. I didn't know this at all, but in Luke 6, 12 through 13, before, early in his ministry, he spent a whole night alone in prayer. The next day, he chose the 12 disciples.
Wow.
And what was that one titled?
Before making an important decision.
The processing grief, that was in Matthew, where was that?
Matthew 14, 1 through 13. Then fifthly, in a time of distress. And this was the Garden of Gethsemane on Mount Olives, hours before he was arrested. And that was in Luke 22, 39 through 44.
One more time on that reference.
Luke 22, 39 through 44. And the last one is Luke 5, 16. He did this to focus on prayer. Just many times in his ministry, he just went to go spend alone time in prayer. Something interesting too was I noticed now, not that having a prayer closet is not important, so don't hear me wrong, but he normally went away and he was outside.
Mm-hmm.
He went somewhere in creation and nature to be alone and pray. And I thought that was an interesting point too, which we'll come back around to that. But one thing too is the word that Jesus used for solitude was often the same term for desert. Mm-hmm. And so the passage that was up there about to recharge after hard work, the second reason, in Mark 6:31, where Jesus uses the word for desert by saying, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." It's the same word, that quiet place, that solitude, was desert. So it's not referencing to desert dryness or uninhabited waste, but a picture of solitude, stillness, the heart alone with God. Same word is used in Luke 4:42. At daybreak, Jesus went to a solitary place. The same word here for solitary as it is for desert. A place of privacy, aloneness, often whole nights in close company with his Father, expressive of his single-minded devotion to the Father's will. So this word for stillness and desert and lonely place were the same Greek word. And when I read that, I immediately thought of the desert fathers and mothers, and was like, what was it that caused? If you guys, I don't know if you guys have studied about them or not, but what caused them to go to the desert, to this solitary place? But in the 4th century, a major shift in history happened. So before that, there was all this persecution happening to the Christians, and then the Emperor Constantine came into power, And he all of a sudden made Christianity okay. Like it was all right. We're not going to persecute them anymore. It was actually now the state religion, basically. And it was a really hard swing. So these people were used to being hiding and being persecuted for their faith.
I'm the only man that wants to listen.
Heck yeah.
Welcome.
Gary says,
Can I just say? Oh no, sister.
I just say I'm delighted. I'm glad you're here.
And I'm not surprised that you're married.
If you need a chair,
Yeah,
It was
right
a joke
over
right
there.
there.
There's a chair. You can join us
I
at
was
the
just cracking right
table.
now.
Okay,
Oh,
what's
look
up?
at you. See at the table.
Welcome.
So there was this major shift that happened. They were used to being in hiding, used to being persecuted, and all of a sudden it became the state religion, and they were used to being like strangers and foreigners in this land, right? They had been rejected, marginalized, and now they were like the cool kids. You know, like no joke, socially it became popular to call yourself a Christian, which led to kind of this, you know, nominalistic type of where people were just Christian by name, right? They're just Christian by name. And I couldn't help but just kind of think about present day, really. And it was a status, kind of social status kind of thing, not a love for Jesus. It was just like everybody goes to church kind of thing, like everybody is a Christian. And they didn't know how to, I mean, how do you respond to that? It was such a hard shift, but they were also like, so how do we stand out? How are we separate? How do we separate ourselves out from the rest of the world if now it's the cool thing to be Christian and yet most of these people really aren't? And it's really one of the reasons why it drove them to the desert. They were trying to figure out the meaning and figure out what this was and finding a way to be separate again. And in the desert, a place where they had to rely on the Lord for provision, they also, it was a place where they could listen again.
Remind me the name of this group of people that were like, you said you called them the desert
Fathers
Desert
and
Fathers.
Mothers. Yeah, there's so much reading you can do on them. I encourage you to. They started basically, first of all, it was just kind of hermits that went out on their own. Well, then like communities started to form. And then eventually, literally what happened was some people started like a tourist. They became a tourist attraction. I'm not kidding. Where people would just go out to like view the hermits in the communities and see. But also there were people going out to seek guidance too from these people that lived out there. This was in the 4th century again. So the stillness that comes in the hours of solitude, the state of grace sought by ancient mystics and saints, by the ones who dialed down the noise and distractions, pressing their ears into the silence, awaiting the murmurings of the still small voice. They had a word for this, and it's called hesychasm. If you want to spell it, it is HESYCHASM. And it's pronounced hesychasm. And it was a tradition and a movement that originated with these desert fathers and mothers, and it was central to their practice of prayer. So for them, there was this practice of an interior silence and continual prayer. So it was kind of a meditative practice and traditionally done in silence. But one of the great men of this time, part of the Desert Fathers, his name was Saint Joseph. And he wrote the aim of hesychasm, or quiet as synonymous word, was to calm the whole man so that it's like the still pool of water, capable of reflecting the sun. To be in true relationship with God, standing before Him in every situation. So again, this was stilling yourself to a place to be like a cool, still pool of water, capable of reflecting the sun. And this reminded me, part of my practice a few years ago, I was living in Ohio, there was a lake close by. And I would go out to that lake many times a week to sit in the stillness.
Wow.
And I often looked at the water to listen and hear from the Lord too. Sometimes it was like glass, and you could see like the other side of the lake just reflecting off of it like a mirror. And it was a calming stillness to me. And other times it was choppy, and it kind of reflected sometimes where I was at even in my life. But if you've ever been to a lake and seen water like that, you feel that stillness that water has. And to be able to calm yourself. I mean, sometimes we're so busy, right, running around. When's the last time you felt as calm as just a still pool of water that literally was like a mirror that could reflect the sun? And that last part too, right, it's reflecting the sun. And when we're so still and able to be at peace, it's the peace of God that's really filling us. That's really being what we're reflecting is His peace. So there were a lot of other cultures and things I looked at too, and we're just going to focus on a couple of them. But a lot of them had these practices of stillness or listening that also involved creation or nature. And the link between the Desert Fathers and then our Celtic Christianity, or Celtic kind of spiritual fathers and mothers too, was kind of, they embodied that same mentality of being able to go out in nature and find the stillness and time to listen. So we're going to transition to the Celtic Christianity. I'm finishing a book right now called, I think, How the Irish Saved Civilization. But if you don't know about the heritage there and what they preserved, like the Book of Kells and all of these things, what they preserved of our Christianity is astounding. It's something that probably most people haven't heard about, and I only know it because Ray Hughes told us. So, but there's a lot there, and some amazing history. But listening to creation and in creation, it kind of requires a recognition of a moment. And so even today, I've always had a hard time with this, and it's been a discipline, again, a practice that I've had to do, is being present. You guys have heard maybe that phrase. So even today and even now, maybe just even check your mind and yourself. Am I actually present right now? Because our mind can go so many other places, and we're not actually here in this moment. And so it does take a recognition of a moment. You could be at a park all day long and not really enjoy any stillness or hear from the Lord. Like, it's not just about being there. It's about a recognition of a moment and the fact that you're in one, and aware of your surroundings. And so even the fact that we have this amazing connection with creation. I mean, the Lord literally created the earth, made us, and then said, okay, you're going to be in charge of this. Here's all the plants, here's all the herbs, here's all the animals, I give you dominion over it. And most of us spend most of our days inside, and when we go outside, we have our shoes on, and we never connect with the earth in any way, neither do we have any responsibility towards it. Yet it's one of the very first things He commanded of us and gave us to do. And I think part of what could help us connect again and be able to listen is a reconnection of what that very first thing was. Because I don't know about you, but if I'm outside, my mind stills. There's something about being connected with it, and I see the Lord in so much of it. He reveals Himself through it. And so I've even been trying to teach my kids in different ways to be more aware of outside. I mean, we don't even pay attention, like weather. Our phone tells us what the weather is, right? There's no need for us to connect in any way with what's going on outside. Our phone tells us. But I've been trying to teach them, like, hey, do you notice the sky right now? Do you see the trees? Can you smell that in the air? I mean, rain has a smell to it. You can smell when rain's coming. It was just a couple weeks ago, Bob and I were on the hill. There's a hill back here, Preservation Hill. It's a park that connects to the back of this property. And you can see over the city. It's beautiful. And we had just went last minute. Didn't look at the weather. We just went. And we were up there, and I was laying on a blanket and just enjoying. And I looked up and I said, I feel like the wind is telling me something. And I looked at the trees and I was like, Bob, is it going to rain? And he was like, no. And I was like, no, I think it's going to rain. And he looked on his phone then, and he was like, oh, actually a storm is on its way. And there was another couple up there. And so I walked over and I was like, hey, I just wanted to tell you that there's a storm coming. Like, it wasn't raining. But it does. The trees, the tops of them will start moving. And if you can smell it and you can see it, right, you can be aware of your surroundings in that moment. You can know that the storm, I mean, how do you think our ancestors, like, do they have our phone?
They're meant to hold up their prehistoric iPhones.
There's
There's a shift
that
in
fancy rock.
the atmosphere.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, we become so disassociated from it that we don't pay attention at all. Or if it's going to be a bad storm, normally the sky's a little green. Like, I tell my kids these things because I want them to know. Heaven forbid our phones don't work someday, but it's so much more than just that. These Celtic Christians, they listened and were in connection with creation so well that they created beautiful, amazing works of art. Like I said, the Book of Kells is a fabulous example of that. But they're artists and writers, and they listened to the voice of creation, that the voice called them to honor God by expecting to find God everywhere. Essentially, in thin places, the voice of creation called them to create beautiful art that manifested their love for God. And so we have so much to learn from them. And so also, Psalm 19, 1 through 4 tells us that the heavens speak to us. The heavens are telling the glory of God, and the firmament proclaim his handiwork. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night declares knowledge. There is no actual speech, nor actual words. Their voice is not heard, yet their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the ends of the world. So, maybe not talking like I am right now, but it's speaking, and it's proclaiming to the ends of the world. And we can join in creation with how they're worshiping the Lord. They are worshiping like they're created to worship too. And it's seen so vividly. Even just, I have this beautiful orchid, and I didn't even know what I was doing with it, but it turned out fabulous. So I was excited. I was like, I think I did something right with this plant. But it literally, so they're normally like all stuck up and pinned up, Well, I just let it grow. And it literally has like 12 blooms coming out of it, but it's reaching out this way, growing how it just naturally would. And the weight of it's so heavy that the pot's starting to lift the bottom. And so I have to position it just right. And it's at my sink. And I was standing there in the morning admiring my plants, getting the dishes done. And the Lord just said, this is the weight of glory.
Oh, wow.
And that orchid, in its beauty and how the Lord made it, was able to speak to me that morning about this right here is an example of the weight of glory. This is what it can look like. And it's taught me so much. I've thought about that orchid so many times. It sits there, and if I would have clipped it up and made it grow straight, even though it doesn't want to, it would have never been able to grow that many, and it would have toppled over. But because I let it be who it's supposed to be, it's reaching out and extending in such a glorious fashion. It's just amazing. So there's so much to, connect with and listen to that's all around us. And so the Celtic Christians had such a way of doing it, and it was characterized really, when I heard this phrase, I was just like, oh my goodness. So if you look back in church history, there's a lot to learn there between some followed after St. John, some followed after St. Peter. We're not going to go into all of that today, just letting you know there is stuff there to discover, but they leaned more towards St. John. And so this is John, the disciple who Jesus loved. He was proud about letting everybody know that. But the example that is called listening to the heartbeat of God, because he was the disciple who laid his head over on Jesus' chest. And when you're that close and that intimately close to the Lord, he could hear his heartbeat. And so their expression was to say, God is that close. He's that here. He's everywhere. And I can be so close to him that I can hear his heartbeat. I want to read you guys this out of. So this book, Listening to the Heartbeat of God, was an awesome resource for this this part of the study I was doing, but I wanted to read this section to you and not try and paraphrase it. But
Who's it by?
it's by Philip Newell. It's Newell.
Thank you.
And it's a short read. It was like a 2-day read. So this tradition that they had, they believed that there was the song of creation, a song that was sung for years and years before humanity even, and it's a song that continues to be sung by the waves of the sea, by the breath of the wind, even while we're asleep at night, or are distracted from our awareness of God. A common practice in the Western Isles, especially among the old, was to intone their prayers while listening to the sea along the shore, so that their voices might join the voicing of the waves, and that their praise might join the praises of the ceaseless sea. And one old woman, she told this story, who used to live out there, she was instructed, she said, from her youth to pray constantly, and to see her prayer as joining creation's unending song. She said, my mother would be asking us to sing our morning prayers to God down in the back house as Mary's lark was singing it up in the clouds, and as the song thrush, another bird, was singing it yonder in the tree, giving glory to God of the creatures for the repose of the night, for the light of day, and for the joy of life. She would tell us that every creature on earth here below and in the ocean beneath and in the air above was giving glory to the great God of the creatures and the worlds, of the virtues and of the blessings. And then she said, my dear mother, my heart loves the earth in which my beloved mother rests. She's just remembering her. But there was this emphasis on understanding that God was in everything that in creation that they could see, and they wanted to be able to join with that. If you move forward in history a little bit, Alexander John Scott in Scotland, last name Scott, he was in Scotland. These were people who looked again for God in the whole of life. He described them as listening for God in all things, in the growth of the tree, in the rising of the morning sun, in the stars at night, and in the moon. It was of supreme importance to perceive the interweaving of the spiritual and the material, of heaven and earth, of time and eternity, in the most ordinary context of day-to-day life. There is a greatness that lies within and beneath the common. We can see and hear God everywhere, for he is the being on which all beings rest. So there is kind of a childlikeness that there is to it, because I think kids just naturally get this and they love to be outside. And they love, they don't have issues with thinking impossible things either. And they have a way of seeing and hearing that's different. And you know that because little kids will come tell you stories about all kinds of things and are like, wow. But there's just this revealing of God's soul that we can see in creation that they really taught us about. And sometimes we don't need the busyness of a church setting. Sometimes we need the solitude of a hill. And we do need both in our lives. But we've definitely neglected and lost the latter. Because the real cathedral of God is the whole of creation. He's not limited to the space we've created for him. He is everywhere. And if we would be able to join all of that and have that perspective that the earth, you know, the whole of it is his cathedral, is his to be seen in, that we could find him and rediscover that God's heartbeat can be heard in the whole of life and at the heart of our own lives if we will only listen. So I talked to a couple of the mentors about this too, and Emily Weeks was one who really stood out to me when I thought about listening to creation, because we have taken trips with her and I have just noticed and paid attention to how she is when she is outside. And I told her, I said, I feel like you just soak it all up. And she said, it's so funny that you said that, because, so here's what she said. I actually have this thing where I make myself sit 2 minutes longer in a moment than what her first urge is to stand up and do something else, just so I make sure I absorb all there is in that moment. And I have watched her do this. We were sitting in Carberry in Scotland out in the courtyard, and she just sat there and sat there and sat there, and she wasn't doing anything. She was just soaking up the moment. And there's, life, again, it gets so busy, but when are we actually sitting and soaking in a moment? There's so many moments that pass us by because we have a schedule to keep, or so many things to do. But there are moments that we need for our own stillness and our own lives, and the Lord wants to be able to speak to us in those moments too. And so she was just an awesome example of that. In the writing process as songwriters, I think sometimes we talk about chasing a song. You guys ever heard that phrase? Hoping that maybe we're going to catch up to it or something. But the thought, though, too, that for our work and listening to our work, that work actually already exists. It already exists. The notes, the words, they exist. It exists in the heart and the mind of God. And we're actually employing a listening skill when we're writing, whether we're aware of it or not. We're listening for His song, His melody, His words. And so we take this process of really discovering the song. And it's a beautiful thing if you think about it in that way, that He's actually partnering with you in the writing room and wants you to discover this thing, and He's allowing you to come and process, and He's excited, oh my goodness, they're going to love this song when it's done, it's going to be so good. And so we call it chasing after the song. And even that phrase lets you know that there's a song to be chased, right? It already exists. It's already there. We're discovering it. We're finding it. And we all have those unique ways, as you guys know from being in the writing worship community. Chrissy has all those songwriting personality styles. We all have different ways that we're able to listen. And we do need to be careful we don't compare ourselves to how other people listen, because each way is beautiful, and it makes us all better and all able to hear better when we then share with each other, I heard this or I saw this from the Lord. So I'd like to get a time check.
11:30. Almost 11:30, 11:29.
Okay, give me a second. I have a practicum little area, and I was like, should I do it or should I not do it? Okay. I'm about halfway through. I think I'm doing okay. Okay.
You got this.
All right. This part, I just want us to, I think I'm going to go to listening for communication. We'll jump here. So we're going to cover some reasons of listening, and there's communication is where we're going to start. So basically what I've talked about with the two-way journaling, these journals, the purpose in of that prayer time is to communicate, right? There's a conversation, there's dialogue happening. There's other resources I found too out there. There's the PARS method for journaling, which is preparing your day, actively listening, and then reflecting. I'm sure you could even buy all kinds of journals where there's this communication happening when you're writing out like that, or even just when you're praying and you're listening to the Lord and you're having that conversation. There is this communication, but and you can do that. Obviously, a lot of times we do it for ourselves, right? There's this, I'm asking the Lord about this, but we can also listen for others. And I remember I was teaching the last listening thing. I really wanted to talk about listening for others, but I felt like it was premature to speak about it because we were covering more deciphering what the voice of the Lord was, so I didn't want to bring that into it at the moment. But I was talking to another one of in the community, Sue Green. She couldn't be here. She really wanted to, and the borders haven't opened. She's from Manchester, and she couldn't get over here for it. So I talked to her, and I was like, what would you say to some people about listening? And I wanted her voice to be heard today, even though she couldn't be here. And oftentimes when we hear sermons or just teachings about listening, when we're praying, we're like, okay, you're talking to the Lord. His answer is going to be 3 things. Can anybody list what the 3 things would be? Yes? No?
Or wait.
Or wait. we hear
Say,
this
I've
a
heard
lot.
this before.
Yeah, we hear this a lot, like he's going to answer you yes, no, or wait. And Sue said, isn't that ridiculous? She said, he's capable of so much more, like, than,
Yeah.
like, one-word answers.
That's true.
It's not a magic 8 ball.
Yes, exactly. He's not a
It's a
magic
very
eight ball.
Western mindset to do that. It's like this, or
Yeah.
that, and it's all concise and.
Yes.
And it assumes we're asking him yes and no questions.
Right, and it assumes, and it's more convenient because it's short. You know, I just need a yes or no. Like, I don't really want to have a conversation.
Well, he's more like a genie. He's more like
Yeah.
an on-demand. He's not really God. He would put him in a box. Like,
Right, and that's, yeah, that was the point she wanted me to share with you guys today, was he is capable of so much more than what we give him credit for, and just like, Lord, forgive us, because he wants to have such conversation with you and communication with you, where you're able to hear from him in that way, like you would just talking to each other. And something that just kind of shifted for me about a month ago even, and I've been listening like in a disciplined way for a while, and I've heard things for other people at times, and I've heard things in writing. And there's a stewardship that comes with that. I do want to throw that out. There's a stewardship. Sometimes it's not for you to share. So just throwing that. Sometimes it's not for you to share. Sometimes it's just something the Lord's sharing with you so you can pray. Other times it is something you need to share. And so that's a discernment thing with you and the Holy Spirit, and you kind of work that out with Him. And then sometimes there's a time, and it's not yet. So there were 2 instances where I had a word for somebody, but it wasn't time. And when it became time, He let me know, and then I was able to share. But recently, and it just, man, I thought, I'm not going to doubt anymore. And so I'm sharing this with you guys, not to say like, I can listen really well. I want to say this to you, is that I don't want you to doubt for 1 second that you can hear from the Lord in a very specific way. That's not just yes or no or wait. But it was a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I had a lady at our house who was wanting prayer, and we had gathered a small group to pray for her specifically, things that had happened in her past, and just wanting to pray through some of that stuff. So I wasn't really sure how the night was going to go, but I was like, sure, you guys can come to the house and we'll pray. So there was probably 5 of us there, and there was another couple that was actually more kind of facilitating that meeting, and I was just hosting. But we got ready to start praying, and I just instinctively, like, I was like, okay, like, almost like a what do I do right now? And I instinctively got up and ran and got my gray journal. Like, I just went and got it. And I sat down and I opened it up. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm ready now. And so they started talking with each other and praying, and just we're asking the Lord to kind of reveal some things and help her work through some things. And I just start writing. And I'm writing and writing and writing and listening and writing and listening to them and writing. 4 pages in, she says something. And I went, let's look at her. And I flipped back 2 pages. And the very first, she was trying to identify what the lie was that she was believing in her life. And I had written down, I started to write down like the lies she was believing on that 2nd page. Well, I wrote 2. And then my hand came up and I wrote one above it in the corner, above the other ones. And that was the very first one she mentioned, and it was right there. And I was just kind of like, I hadn't said a word in the whole meeting, I was just writing. And so then I was like, okay, so maybe I should share something right now. But I, in that moment, I said, God, I don't ever want to doubt one more time that you speak and that we can hear you. And that if we'll listen, you'll share with us. You'll tell us things. We'll be able to help other people. We'll be able to confirm things in our life. And so I share that just to say to you guys, stop doubting. Stop doubting. We do so much of doubting. Is this really from the Lord? Is that really what He says? Is it just me? Stop doubting. keep listening. And so that's listening for communication. But there's this next place that I feel like in my own life, I feel like the Lord's calling me towards, and I'm still learning. So if anybody in here has more experience with it, feel free to share. But there is this prayer and this intimacy with God and listening to Him that moves beyond communication, and it goes to communion. And it's about His presence. And I'm not going to Him just to say, okay, what can you tell me? My pen's ready. But I'm coming to say, I just want to be with you. I just want to spend time with you. And I don't have any agenda. I don't have anything I need from you. I just want to be with you. And it's kind of our classic Mary and Martha, example from where Mary chose to sit at His feet. She chose that communion time. And the deepest level of communication is not communication, but communion. And this is Thomas Merton who said this. It is wordless. It is beyond words, it's beyond speech, and it's beyond concept. And this is the place that I feel like the Lord wants us to get there. And I feel, and at least that's where I'm feeling lately. It's like I want to get to this place where He's saying, like I mentioned before, can you hear my heartbeat? Can you hear my heartbeat? Do you know what it beats for? Like, do you know what His heart's for? Like today, not just in general, not just like God loves everybody, but like, what is His heart for today? Do you love what He loves? Do you hate what He hates? And that comes by sitting at His feet and being in His presence, being able to hear His heartbeat. And so there is this invitation. Listening is an invitation. Revelation 3:20 says, "Listen, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come to him and have dinner with him and he with me." It was a Jewish wedding custom, part of the engagement process, for the groom to knock on the door of the bride-to-be, and if she opened the door, she would accept the invitation to be his bride. And so listening brings this greater intimacy in our relationship with the Lord. It's an invitation to become one with Him. And this happens throughout these conversations, almost like at the dinner table where we're talking about our day and just getting feedback or reconnecting. It's a place where this is deepening intimate relationship. And so my prayer on this section is that, Lord, I want to know you deeper. I want to know your voice above all other voices, and that He would open our ears to hear just directly from Him. And I think listening is also to how we learn. So Jeremiah 33:3 says, "Call to me and I will answer you and tell you great and unsearchable things you did not know." And I can't think of a better illustration than if I look back. So that journal, the red one, is my 2018 journal. I was helping a friend at the time with her ancestry research, just like a hobby that I like to do. And we were actually trying to find her father, her biological father. And I had one hint. And the possibilities, there was a distant cousin was the only match, and the possibilities were like third or fourth degree changes that were, their variables that could have been, whether it was an aunt, a third cousin, a second cousin twice removed. Like, there was a lot of variation that could have happened with it. And so I'm staring at this tree that I had, and I started to pray Hebrews 4:13. Nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before Him, the eyes to Him to whom all must give an account. And we normally hear that and like, hey, you're going to have to stand before God and give an account for all that you've done. But we forget about the first part where it says nothing is hidden from His sight. And so I said, God, nothing is hidden from your sight. Can you show me? Can you show me like where her father is, who he is? And 2 hours later, we'd found her dad. I found a picture of his house. I knew where he was living. Yeah, kind of long story short, we found him, and the Lord had shown me an unsearchable thing. It was impossible for me to find him. And 2 to 3 months later, they actually connected. They verified the paternity through blood tests, and they have a relationship today.
Wow.
Wow. But so we say, Lord, Lord, we want to know the unsearchable things and have fresh revelation on greater things and see the hidden things. So teach me how to listen. Essentially, I think what I'm asking is that we kind of invite Sabbath back into our lives, if you think about it, right? Perhaps that's truly the thing that's lost, if we think about it. But Saint Augustine once wrote, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it rests in you." So I'd like us to do a little exercise together.
1:45.
Yes, okay, if I do this exercise. Yeah! Oh my goodness, you guys. We have time for this exercise.
Okay.
We'll end with this exercise.
Light bulb moment.
Okay, we'll end with this exercise. So this is a listening exercise. So it is a skill, right? It's a skill, it's a discipline that we learn through time. And so this is a journal entry that I did, the red one, I believe. And I was asking the Lord, and this was before our Ireland trip. And I did this with the girls from the Ireland trip too, and it was about tuning our ears to the Lord and preparing ourselves for the trip. So I'd like to do it with you guys in our last few minutes here. So I'm literally going to read some of what the journaling thing was, my asking, and the responses, and then there'll be questions for you to do as well. So I asked the Lord, how can I tune my ears? And he said, just as you would a piano. Every flat or sharp area in your life needs to be realigned with me in the perfect tone of the Spirit. Do this, and your song will join heaven's song. So I said, well, Lord, what are the flat areas? And he said, these represent areas where you have lost your passion or your childlike wonder. The passions are never truly lost, only misplaced. And there's nothing hidden from your sight, like I said earlier. I know right where you left it and will restore them to you. But do you truly want them? Are you willing to accept all that they hold, whether it be trial or treasure? Are you ready to chase after them? Oh, how I wish you would. Wonder is easily robbed from you in this life. Things that once brought you joy, things that you saw in me, you stopped taking time for. The smell of a rose, the shape of a cloud, the colored field sunset. Allow me to renew your mind and remove the world's filters from your eyes. Are you ready to see again? For every day that you live wonderless, you miss fresh revelation. And every day you live passionless, you miss your purpose. So our question in this section, and you guys can just write these down and maybe later this evening or next week have time to actually journal these out with the Lord. The question here is, what flat areas need tuned in my life? Two questions here. One, what flat areas need tuned in my life? Number two, have I lost any passion or my sense of wonder? Just talk to the Lord about it. Be honest with yourself and with Him. So then the next question I asked him was, Lord, what are the sharp areas?
Wait, what was the second one again? Just real quick. Have I lost
any passion or my sense of wonder?
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So that was the flat areas, and we're going to talk about the sharp areas. I said, Lord, what are the sharp areas? And he said, these represent harsh or hypersensitive areas that need smoothed out in your life. So when I heard him say harsh, I was confused because I was thinking of it only in one definition of harsh, like meaning cruel or severe. So I had to look it up. I looked up in the dictionary, and I was reminded that the very first definition of harsh is unpleasantly rough or jarring to the senses. So like drenched in harsh white neon light, as an example, or harsh shouts, harsh light, harsh sounds. You need to remove these distractions and stop staring at your screens and refocus your eyes on me. Stop listening to all the noise and quiet yourself to hear even my whisper. So he talked also about hypersensitive areas. And we're all sensitive souls, like I mentioned before. We're artists and we have these sensitivities, and they're a blessing. We're discerning and compassionate, and we show the beauty of the Lord's heart to others. But let's look at the definition of what sensitive means. So sensitive means quick to detect or respond to slight changes, signals, or influences, or of a person or person's behavior, having or displaying a quick and delicate appreciation of others' feelings. This area of strength, the sensitivity, the strength that the Lord's given us to be able to even do our songwriting and listen to Him, it can become a weakness when it's not kept in tune with or in alignment with the Spirit. So what happens is the sensitivity becomes a hypersensitivity. So we're going to define hypersensitivity now. And a hypersensitivity, when you look it up, it says a tendency to be easily hurt, easily worried, or easily offended. There's a huge shift that happens between being sensitive and being hypersensitive, and I want you guys to see that difference very clearly today. It's a turn from an outward focus. Remember, being sensitive, it even said this was a quick and delicate appreciation of others' feelings. This sensitivity, this outward focus on others, and even in our environment, to an inward focus on myself, being hypersensitive, where I'm easily hurt, easily offended, easily, worried. And so the questions here, there are 3 questions for this section that you can write down to journal out with the Lord later, is what sharp areas do I need to smooth out? Am I distracted?
No hesitation.
Am I focused on myself instead of others? These 2 journaling exercises of smoothing out those harsh places, those hypersensitive areas, and also knowing what things are, like all these things that are flat or sharp. This is how we can tune our ears to hear from the Lord. I want you guys to find ways to incorporate stillness back into your life, and time to just sit alone with Him to make that stillness, because we've got really wrapped up in a lot of things besides being still, right? And okay, I'm going to see what I want to do for closing.
She's all excited.
Got this whole... Okay, first of all, let's take a deep breath one more time. Okay. So the last thing I want to share with you guys then is your call to stillness. This call to stillness is valuable to the kingdom. And it's not just the opposite of busyness, and it's not just inactivity. There's actually an active listening, right? There's an actively listening in the quiet and in the room that all your no's make space for. Okay? So God's been shifting that perspective in me, like I said, and I was always an overachiever, let me tell you guys. Climbing a ladder, always doing, let me check a list and do as much as I possibly can. And I've always loved responsibility, but God's continually called me back to stillness, painfully so. I have let go of so many things in my life, but it's been for my good. I have walked away from jobs and titles and all kinds of things because God said, this is not who I made you to be. And I even felt like free time was actually defined as time that I really should be doing something, but I'm not. It was just this needing to achieve all the time. I'd only rest if my body, mind, or emotions literally crashed. That's when I rest. Yeah. That's when I felt like I deserved rest. Or stillness. I had to earn it. Yeah. And it was guilt-ridden even when I did do it. And yeah, I had fooled myself into thinking that I would only accomplish the purpose I had on my life through the sweat of my brow.
You call yourself lazy for sitting there and doing nothing.
Oh yeah, sure. And You know, it acted like the only preparation I needed in life or for life's challenges was when there was a sword in my hand instead of me sitting at his feet. And so really resting my mind, body, emotions didn't end up in a good place, just let me tell you. But that's literally what the problem is. And Isaiah 30:15 says, Lord Yahweh, the Holy One of Israel says, come back to me. By returning and resting in me, you'll be saved. In quietness and trust, you will be made strong. The last part's what got me there. He said, but you refused.
Yeah.
But you refused.
You said that's 31:15.
It's Isaiah 30:15.
30:15.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's time we stop refusing what he's offering us freely. And it's just so important if we're never still and moved away from these distractions and never take time either to be inspired or challenged in ways that we need to be. We never reflect or wonder. And the wandering mind is actually a powerful thing when it's focused on the Lord. It truly is. And this kind of stillness is the place where all of your why nots and how comes turn into revelations about the heart and nature of God. You get to discover, to know something new about him, and sure, you probably aren't the only one who can perceive it, but you just might be the first one. You might be the one who's willing to share it with everybody else that you know. Because this world is nonstop. It is ever moving and never resting. And someone needs to call them to stillness. I'm learning a deeper and deeper sense of where my strength and purpose come from, and it isn't in the striving or the trying. Elijah would say it like this: it isn't in the wind, or in the earthquake, or in the fire. It's in the whisper, the still small voice. A voice that you'll only hear when you enter into his rest. So your time being still and your time resting with the Lord is invaluable to the kingdom. And it's invaluable in this hour. I'm not just saying that, I actually feel that very powerfully. That God is calling the people to listen again. He has a lot he wants to share with each of you. And you might be the only one who can hear the specific thing. And I want to know what that is too. Like, would you listen for all of us? Like, I want to know too. So let's slow down long enough to spend some time with him. Lord, I've come to listen. This is my prayer. Lord, I've come to listen, to hear only from you, to gaze upon your beauty, to revel in your truth. What is the song you're singing? The birds seem to know this one. Would you take the time to teach me, for I'd love to sing along. The song is one you've always known. I placed it in your heart. It's familiar to your souls. It's been there from the start. Just take a breath and look around and let your wonder go. The melody is still alive. Your heart beats every note.
I'm renting a bake.
That's much.
And so, thank you guys so much for spending time. And just being still and listening. And if you need anything repeated, you can come and ask me. But I do hope you take some time to journal with the Lord and ask him about some of these things. And I do hope you think more about being still this week. So, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.